Good afternoon. I'm Jason Likens, here to introduce Resiliency as a Service, Safeguarding State and Local. My three panelists are Ben Spear, CISO, State Board of Elections, State of New York; Jonathan Reich, CIO, Secretary of State, State of Georgia; Daniel Krebs, CISO, Monroe County, State of New York. If you guys would take a minute and introduce yourselves.
Ben Spear, as Jason said, Chief Information Security Officer for the New York State Board of Elections. I've been in this role for 4 years now, and prior to that, I was the founding director of the Elections Infrastructure Information Sharing and Analysis Center, or EIISAC, and prior to that, spent several years doing cyber threat intelligence for the sister organization, the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, MSISAC.
My name is Jonathan Reich. I am the Chief Information Officer for the Georgia Secretary of State's office. I've been in public sector business doing this for probably 15 years, and about 16 or so before that in the private sector in hospitality. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi, Daniel Krebs, Chief Information Security Officer in Monroe County. Been with the county about 6 years, focusing on developing the programs and supporting municipalities. Thanks.
Awesome. And I'm your host, Jason Likens. I'm the Vice President of Sales Engineering for Rubrik, covering state and local government. I'd like to take a minute, guys, and just jump into some questions. Would really like to hear your opinions on what does a whole of state approach to cybersecurity look like, and how can state CIOs or CISOs help unify security efforts across independent agencies, counties, and even municipalities?
Happy to take this one first. It really, for us in New York, has been a factor of carrots versus sticks. It really started with elections, actually, when a tranche of funding came from federal government. We worked with statewide IT, statewide Homeland Security, the county's IT Directors Association, and ourselves to build a framework for securing the counties. And that ultimately led to a program that is now with the new state and local cybersecurity grant program that the federal government has provided that can support all municipalities, not just elections offices. That has allowed us to now build a whole of state program modeled on that, where the state is now providing endpoint detection and response, security event and incident management, training, multi-factors authentication, and things like that. And the carrot is the big thing, right? When we started our elections program, we didn't just tell everyone, hey, here are all the requirements you have to meet. We did do that, but we also threw money behind it. We were able to provide sub-grants. And the other big thing that I find important is really showing to people that you're a partner. You're not just there to enforce, right? So I don't take this as, yeah, I'm your state auditor, your state regulator. I'm here building relationships with folks like Daniel and other county security and IT directors to be able to help them get, the rising tide lifts all ships. How can we work together to get there, as opposed to how many times I have to slap you on the wrist?
That's great, Ben. I'd like to continue on that if you don't mind. So, as a county in New York State, it's a home rule state. So we talk about sharing the services and the whole of state approach that New York State pushes down as far as leveraging state contract buying power and providing services like EDR and a shared SIM that creates some continuity and threat intel. But also as a county, we can just extend on that whole of state principle and continue those services to municipalities, non-governmental organizations, and politics notwithstanding. We're able to continue providing that security. And as a county, since it's a home rule state, we can't necessarily tell every other agency or municipality, hey, you have to adopt this particular program or you have to adopt this particular policy. What we can do is say, in order to access our systems, you have to meet and demonstrate a certain cybersecurity posture. And you can achieve that posture and demonstrate it any way you want. But by the way, we can give you all of these services for free. And that carrot has been very appealing in a lot of instances. Thank you.
Awesome. So resilience as a service kind of reframes how we think about cybersecurity. Jonathan, I'd really love to know what you think about what that concept really means in practical terms for state and local governments.
I think the biggest thing that people need to understand is the tools you buy obviously should keep you secure. And all the things you do in your repertoire of your toolkit need to get you either past an opportunity, fix it through an opportunity, or deal with it during, right? So at the end of the day, if you're resilient or you're using resilient partners, you're going to resolve your challenges much quicker. I think part of the benefit to some of the things we do in Georgia, at least on the Secretary of State side, is we have a pretty robust program that allows us, both in testing and in real world applications, should it be applied, that I can run workloads and I can do these things that would not necessarily be possible if I was managing things within the on-prem solution or being here. I can spin up things in AWS. I can run them on Rubrik Cloud things. I can even on the bricks. I mean, the resiliency part is so critical to health and living through it, right? It's not if, it's when. And when we get to do it and our plans and our postures and our prepared work, I mean, the resiliency is something that we all think about, but do you actually do something with it? Are you partnering with the right people? Are you doing the best actions in order to provide what, at the end of the day, everybody's asking for, which is going back to normal, getting back to life? So resiliency is, I mean, I don't know of a better way to say it other than it needs to be in the forefront and it needs to be part of it. Just like you think about XDR or EDR or those other tools in your chest, if you can't produce a result in a reasonable amount of time, you're kind of still stuck, even if you're recoverable. And I just think you got to pick the right person. You got to pick the right partner, and you've got to do all the things that, Daniel and everybody else said. But when it comes to it, that resiliency has to be thought of. It has to be an action item.
Ben, you look like you might have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I really want to build on what Jonathan was saying to a degree and say, the reality is, and the framing that we need to look at now is we have to acknowledge that the attacks are going to get through. The attacks will happen, and it's where we're being measured now is how quickly we come back from this, right? How do we respond? And so, these preventative tools, which are important, as Jonathan mentioned, they've to a degree become the old televisions, right? The price stays the same, the features don't necessarily, and the factors need to go to they're commoditized essentially. But how do we do this response? Because the attack's going to come, it will get through somewhere potentially. And what are you doing? And you're being measured on how quickly the agency or the business can get back up to work.
So let's talk about how delivering resiliency as a service differs from traditional infrastructure or product-based approaches. Daniel, do you have any thoughts on that one?
Sure, yeah. Delivery as a service. I mean, as a service, anything, it shifts to the capabilities of anything in the cloud. So you're talking about improved scalabilities, cost reductions, you're talking about increased services. When you're talking about increased services, you're thinking about what additional capabilities is this going to bring to bear. A lot of time is spent on the first three aspects of the NIST CSF. When you talk about as a service, resiliency in particular, you've got more of a stable ground to work with, meaning that when you have to respond, when it's time to execute your disaster recovery, when it's time to make sure you've got the resilience to continue your continuity of operations plans, being able to know that your backups, your response plans, everything you need is in a cloud that's reachable, regardless of what's happening on-prem, in addition to additional services that you don't have living on-prem. For instance, there's cybersecurity aspects where you could filter through different data sets. There's cybersecurity teams that can augment or be on a call with you as you're going through a response situation. And all of that's scalable. So if I don't have it on my data center or in any of my bricks or backups, I've got a number that I can call, get somebody on the line, and help facilitate that reintroduction. And those continuity of operations plans probably include things like Jonathan had mentioned earlier, spinning up different servers in a cloud or in Rubrik's space or in AWS. So as a service, it lends an awful lot of strength to the respond and the recover elements, whereas if you're talking about the front three, then you might be losing value in those products as they mature.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, and I think that's a great point, Daniel. I wanted to take on the fact that I'm going to try not to say the names because I don't think I need to. Everybody will know when I say it. Recently we've had big cloud environments do strange things, right? Even as recent as Monday of this week. When we recorded this, it is a couple days before you probably watching it. But at the end of the day, even the big ones are going to have an issue. And so while we're downstream and most of us use a lot of those platforms in some form or fashion, what we don't want to deal with is having to struggle even further with an on-prem solution that can't get us anywhere, right? So if we don't think that way, and again, back to Daniel's point, if we don't plan it, right? If you don't make purposeful action to come up with a solution, the teams still are flustered and they're still floundering around during any kind of recovery or any kind of event. So I can't say that enough. I mean, I agree really 100% with what Daniel was saying.
I love it. And I think the theme here is we want to improve resilience. So carrying on with that theme, Ben, how do you think a shared governance or a shared services model can improve statewide resilience?
I think with that, it's really something where being able to have a shared view, a shared approach, and with shared services in New York, especially, you have those extra eyes that have the ability to see across the board, right? To understand this threat happened here, this threat happened here. And same thing with using a managed provider in that case in states that don't have what New York is set up. You're able to leverage that to be able to improve your responses and improve and have the expertise for future incidents, right? Something we've done in New York, for the elections when we set up in 2018, we called it the Armor Plan, right? It's just the risk management cycle, but we put a fancy name on it. And the important thing there, though, is that that started as a cyber thing, and it now is used for physical. It's used for all manner of events. And when you get that shared governance and resilience there on how we're going to approach things and then respond to them, we're able to kind of filter that back to the cycle and address things for everyone in that shared fashion.
Jonathan, what about out in Georgia? Do you see any big advantages?
Well, I mean, let's talk about just briefly for a minute, some key areas of resilience. I mean, you've got to be able to deal with data protection, 24/7 monitoring, and where do you get that? I know from the Georgia's perspective is that we're not limited by money. We have all the money in the world, right? Everybody has all the funds and all the things they need to do. Which when you partner and you get scalability and you get things like expertise that are experts, obviously, in that field or in that service, it takes burden off of the state or the entity in crisis. When we talked about, you mentioned like the shared service is part of it. I mean, ultimately in Georgia, for the Secretary of State's perspective, we're a top-down environment. They have to do what we ask. But back, I can't remember if it was Ben or if it was Daniel, but we can't tell you how to do it. We could tell you what we need done. And you could choose to do certain things your way. The shared part of what we do in Georgia is we have an authority, a technology authority that can scale and can provide cost savings based on, purchase power. And, they offer certain things. I'm not part of that organization, but I know it's available to the local level and to the county level. And a lot of people will take advantage of it. And quite frankly, the resilience as a service concept really belongs in a place like a vendor that you trust or an entity that can scale rapidly if you need it. So in Georgia, we love the concept. I don't know how well we really adopt it fully, but we love the concept of shared services and being able to provide. It's just, and I'm sure it's no different in New York, I'll say it this way. Nobody wants to be told how to do something. And I think we all get into that mindset if we're honest with ourselves. It's a political kind of overtone that says, well, you're not going to make me do it that way. But at the end of the day, I think that concept as resilient is really going to save most people's bacon if they really spend enough time to plan for it.
Yeah, I agree. And you actually bring up a good point. As we move in the conversation, we want to talk about like what are some expected outcomes that agencies could have from adopting a service first model? And you just specifically mentioned like cost efficiency. Are there any other outcomes that you see that would be beneficial?
Uh, if I could, I think the biggest one is the sense of community. Again, we come back to the whole situation where we say, hey, we're fighting the battle, but as we sit here, all of us have the same problem. We're doing it slightly different, but at the end of the day, I still have to protect the endpoints. I still have to protect my applications and services that we provide. Why not take the ability of something or someone that can help with some communication or community to say, hey, everybody understands this problem. Cool, great. How are you doing it? How are you doing it? What are some of those abilities? So at the state level, I think having some shared services be able to funnel to the lesser able or lesser staffed or lesser funded environments, that expertise. And I feel that there's some uh, expectation of the state to do that. What's that like in New York? I don't know. But I do think community being able to talk about best practices and having some level of, you're not alone, right? We're all in this together. We're just fighting it with different swords.
Daniel, what do you experience in New York?
Sure. When we're talking about expected outcomes, I'm going to harp on the point of finance. For instance, if we didn't have shared services from the state, we would not be able to offer a program as robust as we do, right? So we're able to reach out to other municipalities and support them, but it also would have an impact on the tools, capabilities, policies, and procedures, as well as the people we have. So it's all about sharing that finite amount of money. So at the end of the day, without having some kind of resiliency as a service, then it would increase our recovery times, recovery points. It would decrease our service levels and quite possibly increase the risk to the county. So that's kind of what we would see as far as outcomes go.
What would you consider the biggest organizational or even cultural barriers to adopting a resiliency as a service strategy?
Mm. Well, you're looking at it's pros and cons of everything, right? If you're looking at it as a service, then there's cloud, and there's two questions: the kind you can answer yourself, or the kind that are answered for you. When you look at as a service, you're looking at availability as a constraint, right? So that's one of the risks that you run. But as far as looking at it from a cultural standpoint, we've got a strong investment in our data centers, right? So if we've got this investment in our data centers, why would we think about moving to a cloud or a SaaS option? And it's all the points that I'd mentioned previously, right? You increase your availability to your disaster recovery, your continuity of operations. You increase the availability to your services. You don't have to worry about like single or geographical problems or risks to your data center. So there's a lot of that, old school IT mentality that everything has to be locked in my data center. And there's been a lot of, revolution of that. There's been a lot of discussion around where that as a service and cloud adoption could improve things. So from my perspective, it's all about like an older mentality that kind of evolves, the metrics that we can justify and quantify on that as a service model outweigh those previous notions. Thanks.
Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll build on what Daniel said. It really is this on the tech side. On the business side, it's they understand this concept of, if we do this, we have a higher chance of resiliency. We have potential cost savings, consolidation. We've been doing a lot of modernization here at the state board. Where we find that cultural breakdown is within our own tech teams, and that kind of, it's the way we've always done it, or this is what I'm comfortable with as a tool. That has been the most difficult when trying to adopt these new technologies, which ultimately do bring more security, more resiliency for us. And so that's what we've worked to try to, with them, to explain to them, work with them on, what's similar, what's different, and how these changes allow us to really escalate that maturity and get moving forward.
Yeah, if I could, Jason, real quick, I want to add, we talk about culture, and the culture is exactly what has been mentioned. However, we're still some of us are in the spot of how do we do more with less? It's a pretty common thing. And somewhat to Daniel's perspective, the availability of data centers and those benefits that come from a cloud-based tool, that can still happen. And I think people are fighting it in the culture of on-prem or have always done it that way. But there is nothing wrong, in my opinion, with picking and choosing the best way for the cloud. People that say I'm anti-cloud or I'm anti-on-prem, that's a pretty stark perspective. And my only question to that from a culture perspective is, if you don't want to be in the cloud, that's fine. But where it matters, right? Like if I do resiliency as a service, I can't be resilient when I'm either with a disaster of natural proportions or a technical fiber cut or a logistical issue you can't solve on-prem. Some of the resiliencies are built into a cloud perspective. And I just think from a culture perspective, we as leaders have to be able and willing to step out and go, but there's a time and place for either way, right?
Let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about quantifying the return on the investment or verifying success of these cyber resilient models, these resiliency models. How can agencies quantify that ROI or the success of these models?
Well, I'll jump back in real quick. ROI is a tough thing with the resiliency because it's sort of like disaster recovery. You won't really know it till you need it, that you needed it, right? And so there is a level of cost, at least from the CIO seat, that says, I'm doing this to place a hedge on a bet. So the cost or ROI almost has to be communicated with a level of risk. And that risk level, wherever you call it, has to have a weight that's different than providing a service, or I'm providing a widget, or Teams or some chat. Those are operational, and you could put ROI behind that. But as a resiliency tool, it's almost in the same perspective, I would think, at the CISO level that says, well, is that backup? Is that where does it fall? Because it's not going to be the shiny car that people see and want to go, hey, I'll pay for that because it's pretty.
Daniel, how does New York feel?
Sure, that's a good point. With the county levels, we're facing a lot of different GRCs, right? So CGIS, HIPAA. From the state board, we've got the 6220 regulations. They all pretty much align to NIST CSF or CIS. An example that I can give is, as part of the 6220, we have to be able to go in and exemplify what we're doing with the backup strategies for our election management systems. So when we were performing those backups and those restorations in compliance with those 6220 we were able to show how quickly we could restore the data over our previous backup, and coupled with the confidence that the data is immutable, meaning that we don't have to worry about checksums and doing validation against it as well. So being able to demonstrate what kind of recovery and the confidence we had in it did a lot to help sell the platform.
When we think about this, as we sort of wrap this up, how do managed service providers fit into this model, and what should you be looking for when you're selecting your different partners?
I think for Georgia, or at least the Georgia Secretary of State's office, we look for a partner that we can trust and provides consistent behavior that shows that we can trust them. I mean, yeah, I say trust, right? But all of this comes back down to a relationship of some sort. If we can't, or let me say it differently, if whoever is looking for a solution can't be confident in both the good times and the bad times, that they're going to do what they've always preached they would, that's a strange issue to deal with. How do you go into a relationship and say, I want your services, but you don't demonstrate that? I know, at least from a Rubrik perspective, we are a customer, and they save your bacon when you don't know your bacon doesn't need to be saved. I mean, there's a lot of times where I've asked our leadership side of Rubrik and say, hey, I know we're not an emergency, but we really need help with this thing, right? And I know consistently over time that the sales and the pre-sales and the post-sales groups all will come out and say, sure, what does it need? What do you need? And so to me, the confidence of a vendor, specifically in this case, Rubrik, I know I'm going to get what I should be getting. And if I think there's a problem, there's always someone who's going to communicate back to me. So in no uncertain terms, relationships and seeing how vendors produce what they say they're going to do and just how they treat you. That's the judgment I think you need to do in such a critical stage or a service.
I'd like to carry on to Jonathan's point if I could. Once you get past the decision points of the return on investment, both operationally and financially, you look to product lines that have mature core products or services, but also, and this can't be stressed enough, the force multiplier of their subject matter experts, right? Being able to call on resources that can augment your staff services and trust that they know exactly what to do. They know the best practices. They can provide health checks, account managers that can offer new features or deals on product lines. Just having that staffing capability that supports those core products and services is a huge deal. And it's also something that we look at when we're making those security assessments, financial assessments, and how they're going to support you with regards to training and professional services.
Thank you guys for your time. We really appreciate it. Daniel, Jonathan, Ben, thank you so much for your time. It's been very insightful.
Yeah, thank
Great to
you.
be here. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.